Cigar Box Nation TV for July 5th, 2016. We are at the beginning of what we have dubbed Americana Month. We're going to be talking all month long about some of the less known, the less used instruments that come out of the American homemade music tradition. Dulcimers, mountain banjos, canjos, other crazy homemade instruments. So it's Americana Month here on Cigar Box Nation TV. I'm Ben Giddy Baker. We got Shane Spiel out there helping with the comments. We got Nick Lanciano here running the cameras. We're going to do our best for you today. So speaking of Americana, there are a few American tunes or songs that are amongst my favorite. Anytime I'm playing a 3-string cigar box guitar like this one, this happens to be our 2-cent Jenny, I always go back to playing these few songs. So I'm going to do one of them here, then do a little more talking. And before I start, this is a How-To Tuesday. You see all this stuff on the workbench here. We're going to be showing you part 2 of our How to Fret, our fretting how-to series. And I got all that stuff here, but before that, a little bit of music. And this is Crawfish Hole. Crawfish hole to get us started off. Alright, few announcements first before we get into the how-to. As I said, this is Cigar Box Nation TV. We do these broadcasts every weekday at 12 noon. Then we throw in some evening stuff, some concerts, all kinds of good special features. Cigar Box Nation TV here on the Cigar Box Nation Facebook page. Give our page a like, sign up for live broadcast notifications. We have a lot of fun. We love homemade instruments. We love cigar box guitars, and you don't want to miss out on any of it. So get signed up. Another announcement coming up in 2 weeks, 9 days, 11 days, somewhere like that. July 16th is the Northern Illinois Cigar Box Guitar Festival, first annual, being organized by Brian Rogan out there. He's got an awesome slate of performers that are going to be on the stage. AJ Gaither, John Nickel, One Hand Dan Russell. I think Johnny Lobo's heading up there for it. You don't want to miss it. If you're anywhere on the northwest corner of Illinois or nearby, get in there for that and check it out. It's going to be a great thing. There is a Facebook page for the festival. Shane should be posting the link for you shortly, and you can find out more information about that. Also, just this morning, Shane Spiel updated all of the features over on cigarboxnation.com, and most of them are related to Americana Month. Old instrument plans and recreations of historic instruments, all kinds of great stuff. So check that out. Cigarboxnation.com is the mothership of the homemade, handmade instrument movement. It's the central rallying point. So if you haven't gone there, check that out. All right, so we're going to get into fretting. And before I do, I got another song. I first played the first version of this last week for the fretting episode, and I've written another verse. This song I've written about fretting, trying to encourage people to give it a try. The name of it is Don't Fret About Fretting. And I just wrote the new verse this morning, so bear with me. Don't fret about fretting, it really ain't that bad. Though it can get a little tricky, there's no need to get mad. Though there's nothing wrong with slide playing, I think we know it's true. If you want to take your guitars to the next level, fretting is for you. Now Shane Spiel built his first one in 1993, and for the next 20 years or so, for fretting he saw no need. Yeah, there we go. But now he's a master fretter, and if you ask, he'll tell you sure. If you want to build a better guitar, well, fretting might be the cure. Don't fret about fretting, it really ain't that bad. Though it can get a little tricky, there's no need to get mad. There's nothing wrong with slide playing, but I think we know it's true. If you want to take your guitars to the next level, fretting is for you. Alright, that is Don't Fret About Fretting. With a verse, I'm going to be adding a verse every week as we do these how-to broadcasts here from Cigar Box Nation TV. So let me get some of my junk out of the way here. Clear a space, because we're about to get busy getting into some serious how-to. Alright. So last week we covered scale lengths, picking a scale length, what scale length means, and how to mark a neck for fretting. So these are the same 2 necks and 1 fretboard that I started on last week. And Nick, if you can bring in the close-up camera here. Last week we marked these for fretting. So if you look there, you can see I've got some pencil lines drawn on this neck. And that was marked out to a 25-inch scale. So, bring it back to the wide view there, and we will take a look. I'm going to try to keep up with your comments here, if possible. I don't know if I'll be able to or not, but we want to hear your questions. Anything you want to ask, I'll do my best to answer it. I know this is not ideal to be farting around with a phone on live TV, but we do our best here. This is mostly unscripted. Cigar Box Nation TV. All right. Turn the volume down here so now I can see your questions. All right. So last week we marked out where the frets will go. I did 2 at a 25-inch scale, and then I did 1 at ukulele scale. I believe this was concert ukulele 15-inch. So once you've got your frets marked out, and I should say you can review that video from last week, the live broadcast from last Tuesday, on how to do that. The next step is to cut your fret slots. You got to cut perfectly spaced slots in this neck for the frets to seat into. To do that, you need a proper saw. And there are a lot of saws that will work for this, and there are a lot that won't. So choosing the saw is important. One of the key considerations is how wide the kerf is. Now, the kerf is basically how wide of a slot this saw will cut based on how the teeth are set here on the blade. Some saws have a wider kerf. Like think of an old hand saw. That's going to cut a slot possibly up to almost 1/8 of an inch wide, or at least a 1/16. Way too wide for frets. Then you get down into coping saws and all kinds of different saws. At CB Giddy, we sell this saw as our fretting saw. It took us a long time to find just the right one. We finally found it, and now this is what we sell. It cuts a perfectly width slot for accepting most common fret wires. Now, some other things to think about, like I say, coping saws, which are the ones that have like the D-shaped frame with the blade suspended in between. Some of those can work depending on the blade you choose. But one, maybe the key thing out of this whole broadcast that I can recommend is that you get yourself a digital caliper. Bring it over here, Nick. I'll try to come in. This is a digital caliper. There it is. I think I got this one from Harbor Freight. It was only 20 bucks or so. And what this is used for is measuring how wide things are. The jaws open up, and you can put that over a saw blade, a tuner shaft, a screw shaft, anything you want, and it'll show you on the readout here how big the measurement is. So like on the saw blade here, I can turn on my digital caliper, bring it here, and see that this is about 0.02 inches wide. 0.02, 20 thousandths of an inch, which is just about perfect for fret slot cutting. Too wide and the fret won't stay in, too narrow, you won't be able to get it in to start with. So just for example, here's another little pole saw that I had. I think my grandpa gave it to me. And if I measure this, it's only like 0.013. So 13 thousandths of an inch, way too narrow. If you cut a slot with this, you probably won't be able to get the fret wire started into it. Now this one, I think, came from Harbor Freight. It's another pole saw style. And if I measure this, it's like 0.030, too wide. If you cut a slot with this, the fret wire is going to pop back out. It won't stay put. You'd have to use glue and all sorts of messy stuff to try to keep it in there. So finding a saw, CB Gitty, we sell these for less than 20 bucks. It's a high quality saw and it actually cuts on the push stroke, which might sound weird, but it's a good thing. I believe it allows more control when starting a fret slot. And we'll get to the actual cutting here in a minute. All right, any questions popping up? We got Christopher Hazelwood saying he has the CB Gitty fret saw and miter box and they work great together. And he asks, can you show us how deep we should go? A little bit of a loaded question, but yes, we will be talking about fret slot depth here in a moment when I get to the cutting. So, we've covered saws. The next question is mitering. Christopher Hazelwood just mentioned the CB Gitty miter box, which we happen to have here. I'm going to show you some other ways. And the purpose of a miter box, or mitering method, is to make sure you cut a straight fret slot without a bunch of wiggle or wobble to it. Because any sort of wiggle or wobble while you're cutting can cause the slot to be wider than you want, especially at the ends. That makes it harder for the fret to stay in place. So, the simplest way to cut a straight slot, and I've got a cigar box guitar neck here. It looks like this one might be ash. So, good hard wood, which is always recommended for slotting or for cigar box guitar necks. And I'm basically taking a scrap of 1x2 wood here, which came off of another neck, and I'll try to get things arranged here so that this top-down camera will show it. I'm going to just try to hold this little block of wood here exactly on this line, and I'm going to try to cut a straight slot with it. Now this is not the most recommended method, I will say. But in a pinch, if you're really steady, and with this CB Gitty saw, it cuts on the push stroke, so I can actually get the slot started with several pull strokes. And once you got a slot started here, it's a lot easier to then actually cut the fret slot itself. And when you're cutting, you want to try to keep your saw motion as perpendicular to the neck as possible. Because you don't want to be wobbling, because that'll widen the slot out on the ends, and that makes those fret ends a lot harder to keep down. So Christopher had asked about slot depth. It can vary, there's no hard and fast rule as to what it should be. You look at your fret wire that you have, and I don't have any fret wire here because we're not getting to fret installation until next week. But you can measure what's called the tang depth. You can bring it back to the wide. You can measure the tang depth with your calipers and see that, it's got a tang depth of about a 1/16 of an inch. Then you want to make sure your fret slot is at least a 1/16, whatever that tang depth is, plus a little extra. Because if you don't saw the slot deep enough, your fret wire isn't going to seat down into it smoothly. If you saw your fret slot too deep, you're going to weaken the neck or weaken the fretboard because you're cutting through more of it. So generally on this one, I went down about, well, hey, I can use my digital calipers here to figure out exactly how far I went down. Handy tool that they are. I went down just about 1/8 of an inch. So I went down probably a little further than I needed to. Honestly, unless you're building super high-end fancy stuff, you don't need to worry about overcutting a little bit. You know, if they vary a little bit, you can always put some wood filler in there to make it look a little better. So don't worry about it too much. The key is to go deep enough so that your fret wire will fully seat into it, but not so deep that you don't want 1/4 inch deep fret slots there, because that's really going to weaken the neck. So I cut that one using a wooden block as my miter, and I was able to do it. I got a nice straight slot there. It's pretty square to the neck, so I didn't do too bad. Not the most recommended method though. It's easy to slip, to get crooked, to wobble, but it'll do in a pinch. Now a step up from that, and again what we're doing here is showing different methods for mitering, using a miter tool of some sort to try to make sure you cut a nice, square, smooth, and straight fret slot. So the next step would be to use a square of some kind. And we go back to the close-up for this. So I've got a machinist square here, which is a small stainless steel square used by tool makers. And then I've got a larger carpenter's square. And I'm going to show you that you can use these because they seat against the edge of the neck. And you get it lined up to that fret slot like so. Hey, shout out to AJ Gaither in the house. From somewhere out in the wild Midwestern region of the United States. He's jumping in here to say howdy to us. In the last episode we did last Tuesday, we showed a couple of AJ's signature model guitars that are on the bench out there in the CB Giddy workshop. And those are soon going to be available. Alright, so as I said last time, I'm holding this square nice and snug here, and because of how the square works, this back part here sits against the side of the neck nice and tight, so you're guaranteed a direct 90-degree angle there. I do a couple of pull strokes to get the slot started, and then I finish it off like so, taking it down about somewhere between a 1/16 and an 1/8 of an inch. That looks pretty good there, and you can always, if it's not really deep enough, you can give it a couple of more. You can always take it deeper, but you can't make it shallower once it's cut. Alright, so that was using a machinist square. A carpenter's square works about the same. It's a little bigger, maybe a little more unwieldy, but you get it right on the line there. Start your slot. Couple of pull strokes, and then you can finish it. And I'll tell you, you don't want to rush through fretting. You don't want to hurry through these steps. Take your time. Make sure you're getting a nice smooth cut, because there's nothing worse than putting a lot of time and effort and potentially money into a fine neck or a fretboard only to cut a slot in the wrong place or have your saw slip and gouge it. There are things that can go wrong, but if you take it easy, take it slow, be very careful, you will get nice, good fret slots every time. Okay, so that was using what I'm trying to do here. You can bring it back over, Nick. What I'm trying to do is show you how you can use tools you may already have to do this, and we're working up to the easiest, in my opinion, and our recommended way of doing it, which would be to use a dedicated miter box. And it just so happens that we have one that was designed here at CB Giddy. We actually had this from idea to listed product in about 3 hours one day. Shane and I were brainstorming, and he said, "Hey, what about some sort of miter box cut on the laser?" I was like, Eureka, what a great idea. So this was turned out, and we made this to be used for cigar box guitars. It's just a hair over 1.5 inches wide, and you can see it here. And it comes as a kit, actually. These are tab-in slot sides here that get tabbed in, and you can glue them in place. We put some screw holes in the bottom there that you can use it to mount to a larger board. Gabriel down in Brazil giving us a shout out. Howdy in Brazil. Alright, so using this, I've got it put together, and you see it has this slot and this opening cut here. that is where the saw goes. We're still, where are we at? There we are. So you can see I can line up my marked lines with those slots in the saw, and in doing so, where's my fret saw? There it is. Line it up, and then because of how this miter box is made, I can actually squeeze these sides. Where are we at? Over here. All right. I can actually squeeze these sides. trying to get in the picture here. All right.
Sorry, guys.
Maybe to this one, Nick.
Yep. 1 second.
All right. Bringing the camera over. Takes a second to mash all the buttons. All right. So I've got the slot lined up. I'm squeezing these sides together to hold the neck. And at that point, you can make quick work of it. And we've got these oval openings cut here so that you can flip it up and see how deep your slot is. So that one is just about deep enough. Now, we've had a Cigar Box Nation member, I didn't have Shane prepare this link, we had a guy come up with a depth guide system for this saw in this miter box using acrylic to make it so you can set the depth. We're actually looking at, now that we have the ability to cut stainless steel, we're looking at doing that as well on a more permanent basis. So, where was I? All right, I cut the slot. Now, that's using a miter box. There are other miter boxes, even fancier than this, available. We're working on a deluxe model of it here at CB Giddy. But this will get you going. It accepts the 1.5 wide 1x2 stock that a lot of people use for necks and fretboards. It also works for a fretboard as opposed to just a neck. Like here we have a fretboard. It's about 3/8 of an inch wide, and it's a hair over 1.5 inches, so it's a snug fit. But I can get that in there and still get my saw started and turn it up to see how deep the slot is. That's about right. Pull that out, and I've got a pretty perfectly cut fret slot there in what will be a fretboard on a cigar box guitar. All right, you can bring it back to the main camera there, Nick. That's using the miter box, the CB Giddy miter box. I showed you using squares, how you can do the same thing. Now, as I said, when you're cutting that slot, even with a miter box, which makes it a lot easier, try not to skew, try not to twist. Always try to keep a perpendicular 90-degree action to the slot you're cutting, because you don't want to widen out the ends of these slots. Depth control, you can do pretty well with eyeballing it. Another thing you can do is actually use some blue painter's tape or masking tape on the blade of your saw. And I'm just eyeballing it. You could of course measure it with your calipers if you want to. So I put that right on the saw, and that's going to help me see when I'm cutting, because it'll still fit in the slot of the miter box. So that's going to help me know where my depth is when I'm cutting these slots. So I get it there, and I know you can't really see this on the camera, but trust me when I say that when the depth of the cut gets down to where I can see that the tape is touching, then I know I've got a slot of about the right depth. And of course you can always go back and tweak it a little more if it isn't quite deep enough. So there we go. A quick, cheap depth guide for a fretting saw using blue painter's tape. And when it starts to wear out or get boogered up, you take it off, put a new strip on, and you're good to go. Eric Denton asks, is this the method you use for the pre-slotted ones that you sell? And he's referring to the pre-slotted necks and fretboards that we sell on cbgiddy.com. The answer is no. I'm not even showing you that method. We've got it set up out in the shop using power saws and special blades. I'm not showing that because it's not what most of the people watching this will do. It's an expensive setup. It took a lot of testing and figuring out to get it just right. What I'm showing here is the method that is the most available to everybody out there, all of you watching. This fret saw, and if you look at the link that Shane, I'm sure, has posted for it, you can add on the miter box combo, and it's only like 20 bucks for the pair. It's a high quality, made in USA saw, made in the USA here at CB Giddy miter box. So I believe it's $19.99 for those. Should have looked that up before I started talking. So you can get into it pretty easy. Those two tools get you very easily to the point where you can consistently cut high quality necks and fretboards. All right, Shane posted the link there. Just looking if there's any other questions that have popped up. Looks like we're doing good. Alan Van Story, thanks for the shout out down there. We see your name pop up on the Cigar Box Nation Facebook page quite a bit, so we're glad to see you. All right, another thing you can do, I didn't bring one here, but if you're worried about getting your saw started on the slot, you can actually use a razor knife. Is there one in that bin there, Nick? You can, like using a square, you can take a razor knife. It was closed before you threw it.
I made sure it was closed.
So you can actually start your slot using that, and that can help your saw find the spot without slipping or wondering. And once you got a little bit of the slot started, you can usually remove the miter because the slot will hold the saw in place now. And you get your slot cut as deep as it needs to go. So, what else on my list here? Summary. What to do. Use the right saw. Find a saw. We recommend ours, of course, but it can be any saw. Lowe's sells some that'll work. So the correct saw, it'll cut the correct width slot. Use a miter of some kind, whether it's a square, a block of wood, and you could, of course, clamp this using a squeeze clamp before you started. We recommend the CB Giddy miter box. That's up to you. So use the right sort of saw and the right miter box or some sort of miter, and you should get to the point where you can consistently cut nice, smooth, straight fret slots. Yes, I had something else to say. Oh, if you're getting into it for the first time, practice on a piece of scrap. That's another piece of great advice. You know, if you've got some 1x2 cutoffs around, try it out. Get used to it before you tackle your special neck or your special fretboard that you want to use on your guitar. So that is all of the advice I have for how to cut fret slots. Again, this is part 2 of what will likely be a 4 or 5 part series on how to fret. Last week in episode 1, we covered scale length and how to mark your neck. In this episode, we've covered how to properly cut the fret slots. Next week, we're going to be tapping some frets into this neck and trimming them off. And then in the final week, we will talk about smoothing and filing and things like that. So I hope you have enjoyed it. This has been Cigar Box Nation TV. Let's see, I'm supposed to go out on a song. Would you believe I didn't prepare a third song? It's going to be Americana Month here on Cigar Box Nation, Cigar Box Nation TV. Check out the latest features that Shane Spiel has just posted on cigarboxnation.com this morning. Almost all of it related to classic homemade American style instruments, dulcimers, mountain banjos, cigar box guitars, all sorts of things from the history. Part of what has helped make American musical history. The role that these instruments played in mountain music and old-time music, which then rolled into bluegrass and country music. You know, we talk a lot about the role of homemade instruments like cigar box guitars and diddley bows in the formation of the blues. And that is a deep and rich and fruitful history. We're talking about another side of the homemade instrument history here, and that's the Americana, which of course blues is a part of as well, but Americana, old-time mountain, and then flowing into country and bluegrass music. So going out of tune a little bit there. All right, I did Crawfish Hole. Cigar Box Nation TV, I'm Ben Giddy Baker, and we are signing out.